Welcome to the Shoegazing podcast. I'm Jesper Ingevaldsson, running the classic men's shoe blog Shoegazing, which you now find the international edition of on the new address shoegazing.com. For this episode, I met with bespoke shoemaker Daniel Wegan, who has been working for 10 years at the bespoke department of the famous English brand Gaziano Girling. Early in his career, he was dubbed the wonder child of the bespoke shoe world, and it was no surprise when he this year won the world championships in shoemaking. Although Daniel obviously has a lot of talent, the main reason he has succeeded so well in shoemaking is spelled dedication. After all, this is the guy who does a regular 40-hour work week as a last and pattern maker at Gaziano Girling, and then on his spare time during evenings and weekends does another 40-hour job week as a freelancing bottom maker for the same company. So when I met up with him in Tokyo, Japan, for this podcast interview, we focused our discussion around this topic, and he also gives a lot of advice to aspiring shoemakers out there. Daniel Wegan, welcome to the Shoegazing podcast.
Thank you very much, Jesper.
We both actually have sort of a similar background, growing up in suburbs out of Stockholm in Sweden, and we did mountain bike racing in our teenage years, and here we are now.
Yeah, back together again, on the other side of the world.
Yeah. I know that you, through the years, among other things, been really into a bunch of stuff. Bikes, one of them then, and I think you collected aquarium fishes, danced swing, and other stuff. Have you always been nerding in on things?
Yeah, I think I'm a lifelong nerd. I tend to do pretty much one thing at a time and do a lot of it, maybe to the point of exhaustion. That kind of get really into it and then really over it and move on. Okay. What makes me change my hobby, I don't really know what that is, but you do something long enough, you kind of get tired of it, or you just want to do something different.
Should we be nervous that you quit shoemaking?
Everything I've ever done, I thought, this is amazing, I'm going to do this my whole life. And obviously I haven't. So, but at the moment, I think I'm quite enjoying the shoe industry, or the shoemaking part of it, and it's probably the first one that I've enjoyed having as a job.
Yeah.
The other ones have been hobbies, or when I've done them as a job, maybe I haven't enjoyed it that much. Yeah. So this has translated well into a profession, I think. Yeah. So for now, I don't see myself quitting anytime soon. It's been 10 years now, so I'm sure I can do another 10 at least.
Good. So when and why did you get into shoes?
I think most people of my generation of shoemakers, maybe a little bit earlier as well. I think before these times you would get into shoemaking maybe because you were born in a shoemaking family, you were born in an area that had a lot of shoemaking, like in Northamptonshire where I live. I think most of the people I meet today, they're not from these areas or with this background. It's something that you've come across, whether you're into only shoes, or maybe you're into menswear perhaps, which shoes are a big part of. And you find out of the product or the item that way, and then maybe you decide that, okay, I want to make it, or I want to be involved somehow. Maybe you want to have a store of high-end shoes, maybe you want to write a blog about high-end shoes. Yeah. So I choose the making side, because I'm not really a business or sales kind of person. I like to build stuff. And I like gear, I like tools, I like books, I like all that stuff, and as a shoemaker, you can have there's a lot to play with, so it's a good hobby. You can collect and gather items, not just shoes but everything around it. So it's if you want to occupy your time, it's a good thing to do. But I think personally I got into it through a little bit of a kind of menswear perspective. I got a little bit into clothing, and like you mentioned before, I used to do a lot of swing partner dancing, and it's not really that into clothing, but it's not like bicycles. You can buy bicycles and parts and stuff, so you're kind of left with the shoes and the clothes a little bit. So I kind of gravitated towards the shoes. Maybe I had a hard time finding shoes that I really liked, or you thought things could be better, and you started dreaming about these bespoke shoes you read about, and all that stuff, and who makes them, where do they make them. So just started to investigate through the scene of clothing and shoes.
And tell me a bit about how you went to England and got to start at Gaziano Girling 10 years ago then, because I think it says a lot of the topic we are to discuss.
Yeah, no, it's when I first got the idea that I wanted to make shoes, I wasn't really looking to leave Sweden or Stockholm. I was quite happy with my hometown and the life that I had there with friends, and I had a job that I was quite happy with, and I was just looking around because I had no idea maybe there is a shoemaking school in Sweden or shoemakers. I didn't really know them. I know the big famous brands were in the UK and France and Italy, but I didn't know if there was a possibility to do it back home without having to change your life or change your environment so drastically. But I kind of quickly realized that there's not really any shoemaking around in Sweden, not to any great extent or at the level or the type of shoemaking that I wanted to do. I don't really remember what I had in mind. I think I just had a vague idea that shoes are cool, I want to make them and make that a job, and I can live in Stockholm and sell beautiful shoes to people around here. But I think now I know that that's not really that realistic. So I did have a brief contact with a kind of crafts organization in Sweden that tries to find people apprenticeships for a lot of crafts or even other types of jobs, just getting students connected with masters, or feeding the industry and giving students an opportunity to pursue maybe a career that's not a typical kind of university degree or something like that.
Was it them who directed you towards Northampton?
No, they I basically had a friend of mine who's a saddle maker or leather worker help me get in touch, and I put together a letter, who I was, what I wanted to do, what I was looking for, and they liked the letter enough to take me in for an interview or a kind of consultation maybe. But basically just said, you seem really interested, but there's nothing for you really, not at the moment anyway. And maybe not what I was really looking for. So it kind of ended there a little bit. And I instead just went on and probably sent an email to every shoemaking company in the world. But I got almost no answers, or very short answers that were not too optimistic. But I did get an answer back from Dean Girling at Gaziano Girling, where I work now. And we did agree that I was going to go meet him in Norwich, where he lives. I went to England probably in March of 2009, I think. and I spent an extra day in London, and I thought, I didn't get an email back, but maybe if I go knocking on the door, I'll can maybe get hold of somebody that can give me some more information. Maybe not get me a job or an apprenticeship, but tell me what to do or why I'm not suitable or what do I need to do to become suitable or more interesting to them. So I went to Cleverly, Lobs, Foster's, and just had a quick chat with whoever was there at the time. And I think none of them were really that interested, I think, because at the time I had almost no experience. I was quite willing to work for free for a while, because I understood that with my little experience I can't be of that great value. But there was nothing really there. Some of them had apprentices already, and now working for a company that attracts apprentices or people that are into shoemaking or want to pursue it ourselves, I know how difficult it can be. So I wouldn't say that anybody was typically negative or dismissive. It's just it's not businesses that are highly profitable, so they can't throw money around just having apprentices. And when you have an apprentice, you have to invest a lot of time teaching them, which distracts you from what you need to do as a craftsman. So I know it can be really difficult. So I wouldn't hold that my lack of opportunity in London, I wouldn't hold that against any of the companies there.
But then you met with Dean then? Yeah,
I did take the train up to Norwich, and we had a quick meeting. He showed me the workshop where he works and run and still runs part of G&G from. So he just said what they were doing at the moment, because they were just starting their own factory. Up until then they've only done bespoke and experimented with having some ready-to-wear shoes within the Alfred Sargent factory. But that was at the moment kind of coming to an end, and they were starting their own factory. But I think they've only really operated that for literally weeks, or even that, when I saw him. So it was very, it wasn't really much there. There was a building with some machinery, but it wasn't really a really production going on. So I basically was offered that you can come here and learn from Dean. So we were I went home, and we, had kept in contact and tried to make some arrangements to agree on when is this going to happen, how, what, when, kind of thing. But it turns out the factory was a lot of work to get going and to run. So I think Dean realized he's not really going to have time to spend with me. So we decided after a few months that instead of me going to Norwich, that I would move to Kettering in Northamptonshire, where Tony was based and is still based, and where we have the factory now, to go and spend time in the factory and with Tony, because at least there would be some kind of shoemaking going on all the time, rather than go to Norwich and Dean not making shoes and just running the business. So it would allow me to be in an environment and kind of get used to shoes and, suck in as much as I could from, because I had no experience, so that was definitely better than anything I'd ever had back home here. So it was as good of an introduction as any, and I think in many ways it was probably quite good, because in the factory you could do simple independent tasks. You don't have to be a complete shoemaker. You can learn one part, do that, maybe get paid for that, and then kind of build step by step more knowledge and skills.
You sort of both did stuff for the ready-to-wear and learned from Tony on the bespoke.
Yeah, at the moment the bespoke department was a very typical kind of outworker-based bespoke business, where Tony would fit the lasts up and modify them, measure the clients and do some pattern work, but then use an outworker, upper maker, or closer as we call it, and then maybe send that on with the last to a bottom maker. So there wasn't really a lot of shoemaking going on in that place, but it would allow me to see what shoes were supposed to look like and what they would look like in different stages. And it was just, before I came to England, I hadn't really ever seen a bespoke shoe in real life before. So just being in an environment where you get subjected to these things and helps to educate your eye, and that, okay, this is what they actually look like up close. And when you try to do your own shoes, you have a reference to kind of strive for. And I've later realized that some of the makers we used at the time are probably one of the better makers around in the world. So I think it was a very good thing to see that as a first impression, that you just assume that it's all like this and you just try to copy it. And it wasn't until years later I realized that there's a lot of worse shoes out there. So I think that was really, really helpful.
Yeah. And what was your goal when you started with shoemaking?
I think, like I mentioned briefly before, my original idea was that I would stay in Stockholm and learn the shoes and basically, like I think a lot of people, because I see it with people that want to get into it, it's basically you want to take a shoemaking course and then you think, I know how to make shoes, I'm going to start a brand and everybody's going to love my designs and they're going to fit perfect every time and the leather is going to be amazing and everybody's going to love it and it's going to be great. It is great, but it's a lot more work. And I think, so my original plan probably kind of ended quite quickly. So after moving to England, I probably thought of myself as somebody that would maybe be one of these outworkers or a freelance shoemaker, at least for a good couple of years, and maybe slowly venture into something where I would make shoes for myself one day or so. But at the moment I was so focused on just learning it, I wasn't thinking much what I would do with it when I knew. And I saw quite quickly that, okay, if you want to do last upper patterns really well, which I wanted to do, I knew I wanted to do it well and be really good at it, not just try to settle for a basic knowledge just to have a job. I wasn't really interested in that. I wanted to just see how the fun part was getting better, so I wanted to keep getting better. I knew that much, and to be able to at least make a living of it. But I didn't know if I wanted to have my own business, if I wanted to be a bottom maker, exactly what it would look like. But I knew that working at G&G, I saw that making shoes, having your own company was a lot of work, and I thought it's going to be many years before I even need to consider that. So let's just focus on the shoes for now, and the business side, later.
Yeah. Now, 10 years later, you are considered one of the best bespoke shoemakers in the world, and actually the reigning world champion. But what did you do to get there? Can you sort of explain?
Well, I started making one shoe and then another one and then another one. I think it's just been, a big help has been to be, like I mentioned before, in the environment of good shoes. I wouldn't say that you can't learn to make really good shoes independently if living in a country that maybe doesn't have shoemaking the way England or France or Italy or Japan, like we are now, does. But it definitely does help. I think now with the internet, the need of being around is maybe a bit less. The world kind of shrinks a little bit, and you have access to seeing these things to educate your eye. So you can go, if you're making a shoe and you're not sure if the shoe, the way you welt the shoe, if it looks right, you can go on the internet and you can just find, or the Instagram, and just find as many pictures as you like from almost any shoemaker that you would admire and try to imitate, or try to reach their level and use it as a visual reference. And you might not be able to see how they did it physically doing it, but you can see the end result, and that's the important part. If it looks the same and wears the same, it's probably very, very similar. So if you can get it to look like that, you're probably almost there. So it's just when you're struggling, it might be really good to have somebody to give you some advice. But I actually think that advice is probably more valuable maybe later in your shoemaking career than in the beginning.
Why?
Because if you take a shoemaking course or read a good book, or you can pretty much figure out what you do at what stage. You make an upper, you have a last, what do you do and at what stages. Once you know what to do, the most important part is to do it a lot. So just to repeat over and over and over again until you get it into your kind of muscle memory and learn from your mistakes. And usually you progress really fast in the beginning because you don't know anything, and each pair there's lots of new lessons you have learned, and you can really improve at quite a rapid rate. And I see it with most of the apprentices that I've trained, or I'm sure colleagues of mine have a similar experience, that you can really progress to a certain level really fast if you just put in the hours. But then, almost everybody hits some kind of wall where you kind of feel like you're doing everything right, but you're not getting to that next level. And I think that's when you need advice from more experienced maker, or not even necessarily more experienced maker, maybe just another person who's in the similar position as you are, that maybe figured something out, and you can kind of fill in each other's blanks a little bit, but for me personally, to reach where I am now, I think it's been a combination of being at a firm that has been very generous in kind of pushing me and allowing me a lot of freedom to learn through making mistakes, and also to see another part of the shoemaking side, which is I was put in a position to kind of travel and see clients and see that side of it probably a lot earlier than most people working with shoes. I came into the business of Gaziano Girling when Tony was kind of focusing more on running the factory and doing a lot of product development and design and dealing with retailers and so on, that there wasn't really the same time as there used to be to run the bespoke side. And they saw I was very interested in it and wanted to learn more, and probably thought it wouldn't be a bad idea to get me more involved. So they started taking me on trunk shows and seeing clients like very early in my career, which is very generous. Maybe in hindsight, maybe I thought I wasn't really ready for that. But at the time, I probably thought that it's like, oh yeah, they're giving me this opportunity. It must be amazing. And I think it was probably maybe a little bit of both. Maybe not amazing, but definitely, something that I would be capable of doing. But it's definitely been a very steep learning curve. It's a lot easier to learn when you have to than if you just do it out of curiosity or as a hobby. So I was given a lot of problems to solve, and just tried my best at doing that. That's I think that's helped me to learn a lot of things in a fairly short period of time, and just necessity. Like I working for a company that has a high quality and is recognized before I got there as one of the more prestigious firms, even if they were quite young at the time, but definitely got a lot of attention for quality and a little bit more modern designs, at least for an English firm. I kind of had a lot to live up to not ruin that. So definitely had to kind of outperform my skill level a little bit to not mess it up.
And looking at your regular days, how many hours do you spend working with shoemaking an average week, would you say?
I would say probably on average, it's hard to count for me because I do a lot of different things. A lot of time can be spent just traveling to see clients, not just on a trunk show, but being up in Kettering in Northamptonshire and seeing most of our clients on Savile Row, where we have our store. It takes a lot of time to get down there, and I wouldn't necessarily call that work, even if I try to do some emailing and ordering supplies and things when I'm on the train. It's not like I'm sitting down and lasting shoes every hour, but I generally tend to go to work around 8:30 in the morning. Usually leave about 5:30, 6 o'clock, and then usually I start another little shift in my workshop at home in the evening, usually around 7 or 8, and usually go on to around midnight or quite a bit past that most days of the week.
And weekends?
And weekends, it's I don't get up that early, but I definitely finish late. But it's a mix. It at the moment for me it's just all shoes all the time, and it's been like that for probably the last 7 years. So even if I'm not necessarily making shoes, it's doing something with the shoes, or something Gaziano Girling bespoke shoe department related all the time.
Because your everyday job is sort of as a last maker and part of running the bespoke department of Gaziano, and then the second shift, as you describe it, in the second factory of Gaziano Girling, which is your home. Then you do. Can you say that you're freelancing as a bottom maker for Gaziano?
In the evenings and the weekends, I would probably say that I do what an outworker bottom maker would do. That is that you have a last and an upper, and then you put it together to make the final shoe. So if I was an outworker, the things I do during my spare time, that's what I'd be doing as a full-time job. But now, like you mentioned, I basically my 9 to 5 is to be a last maker, pattern cutter, kind of managing production of bespoke shoes at Gaziano Girling, and also kind of training apprentices, and basically everything that needs doing in a workshop like that. And now that we're couple of people of our team, it's been maybe become more of a management job or quality control, or just giving the go no go on a lot of things. Before, when we were just 1 or 2 people there, it was probably not that much to manage. You just go to work and make lasts and patterns. But even as a manager, I do still make all the lasts, see majority of the clients for measurements and fittings and deliveries, and a big part of the pattern cutting as well, even though now I have more of a dedicated pattern cutter closer. And a few in-house makers, along with apprentices that help with making shoes for fittings and other things that needs doing. small tasks.
But more and more people have been interested in becoming shoemakers in recent years. But do you think that people in general understand the dedication needed to succeed?
I definitely think they don't, if they've done any of it. It's definitely the hardest thing that I've ever had to do out of my hobbies or kind of career choices or attempts of a career choice. It's just so incredibly unforgiving job. Because you can put so much work into it and it can still be wrong, or the customer doesn't like it, or you have and probably especially with like fit and colors, and there's so much that's kind of open to interpretation. So when you're fitting a client or making a shoe, designing a shoe for a client, you know, what we're really looking at is something that's they're telling me and I'm interpreting their wish. So it's just an interpretation of what they're asking for. And you know, when somebody says, you know, they want a sharp square toe or something, you know, that can look a lot of different ways to a lot of different people. So when I present something, that's what I thought that they wanted, and maybe it wasn't quite right. And to change it, leather being a material that doesn't really like to be taken apart and put back together again, maybe that maybe textiles could in some ways for a tailor. To do any changes is a lot of work. It can be very expensive, a lot of waste. So to do shoemaking at this level is very unforgiving and a lot of work. And you just have to do a lot of things over and over and over again and take it on the chin when it doesn't come out right. And I'm not sure that anyone can really expect to be prepared for that. It's definitely not what you dream about when you think you want to start a shoemaking career. You want everything to be perfect all the time, and I think what a lot of people don't expect is also how demanding the clients can be, and rightfully so. Like our shoes are sold as probably some of the better in the world and has a very high price tag, and it take a long time to get them. You know, waiting lists can be a year or 2 years. So the customers has every right in the world to expect a lot, but it's still just a pair of shoes, and it can be difficult to live up to sometimes unrealistic expectations, and sometimes you have to manage those expectations. So the shoemaking side, the making, the designing, all of that is great, and what I think keeps people in the job. You know, the selling, promoting, that side, you know, I don't think that's really what shoemakers enjoy.
When at Gaziano Girling, how do you work when bringing in new apprentices, and how do you judge if they have the dedication needed?
No, this is a very difficult part of the job. For us, you know, apprentices generally tend to come to us. We don't have to trace them down that much. So we get emails, maybe somebody will pop into our store and introduce themselves, but usually we get an email, try to see if they've done any work before and send us some picture of their work. But we usually try to at least have people come visit the workshop, see what we do, even if we're not in a position to offer an apprenticeship at the time, just to give them a peek of what the industry looks like from within, if they haven't really seen that before. Maybe they just took a course or done a little bit on their own. But if there's somebody that has a little bit more experience, maybe they spend a year at some other firm somewhere, or maybe a longer period in some school for shoemaking, we usually ask them to bring in something they've made. We look at it, see where there's room for improvement. Maybe they can take some constructive criticism and go home and see if they can improve it and come back. But for the people with less experience like that, the hardest part for us is knowing if what they really love is just shoes or making shoes, because there's a big difference between those two. I meet a lot of people that love shoes, which is great. Our businesses or industry is based on people loving shoes. But I think a lot of people kind of want to be shoemakers because they think, oh, if I can make my own shoes, I can design my own shoes and wear them, and that'll be really cool. Those people are not usually cut out to spend hours and hours and hours and hours for years making bad shoes to eventually get to something that would be acceptable. And even when you reach a really high level, it's not a really well-paying job. So you have to really love the making part. If you only do the making to get to the end, you're not gonna have a good time. But if you do enjoy that part, you'll have a lot of good times. And I still love the making part, even if I don't love it all the time when it's 3 a.m, because something has to be delivered the next day. I do that so that I get the satisfaction of delivering those shoes for somebody that wants them and appreciates them. So there's you gotta give and take a little bit, but it's definitely the tricky part is knowing if they want to do it enough.
Yeah.
Maybe they like doing it, but maybe just on their spare time, a couple of hours a day, and you can get to that level. But when you're learning, you gotta do at least I usually tell people you need to do at least 25 or 50 pairs before you know if you are any good or if you even like it. And if one pair is maybe for somebody inexperienced can take up to 40-50 hours, doing 50 pairs, it's a lot of hours, especially if you have to do it on your spare time.
Yeah.
So if you can't quit your day job, you might take years before you even know if this is something you really want to do. Because I think now I roughly estimated that I've made over 500 pairs of shoes so far. And I would definitely say that the first 100 are the worst, and then it gets better. It gets easy, more fun. So to read, and that you're looking at maybe 3 years to get to that number. So if you work full time, so it's finding the time to put in the hours, and to do that you have to. I wouldn't call it sacrifice, because if you consider it a sacrifice, you shouldn't really do it in the first place. It's just maybe a compromise that, okay, there are other things in life that are fun, but I'm gonna have to put them aside a little bit in favor of this thing, and in this case, shoes. And it isn't, it's with everything. If you want to be a great athlete, you want to be a great, student, you can't do all the things you want all the time. You're gonna have to put some things aside for later or forever. I don't know, but it's just saying like who do you want to be? Do you want to be really good at this? Then you have to do it a lot. So and you see it here in Japan. There's a lot of great shoemakers here, and everyone I've met put in hours that I think would make most 9-to-5 workers shake in fear.
And what advice would you give someone who is having the dream of becoming a shoemaker and are about to persuade it?
I think if you want to get into shoemaking, the way I did it is I try to find a place that does the kind of shoemaking you would like to do. Maybe in a country which is easy for you to get to, maybe not physically get to, but to stay in. If you need a visa, then things get kind of complicated. It's good if you can speak the language. It's probably great to go to another country and learn a new skill and a new language, but to do both at the same time can be quite difficult. And I think, if you're an apprentice, the person teaching you is going to be annoyed with your lack of skill anyway. So the language barrier is not going to help. So if you speak good English, probably try to stick in with people that speak good English so you can understand each other and communicate. Unfortunately, I think it could be a little bit of a money thing as well. When I started, I basically worked a lot and tried to save up enough money to last me a year as an apprentice without getting paid. And that, I think, is for anyone who doesn't really have any previous experience, because I can probably tell most people that want to get into shoes that if you haven't really made shoes before, or you took a week course, your value to a bespoke shoemaker is basically zero. Because even if you can help with certain things, while they're looking over you, they're not doing their work and making any money. So if anything, you know, I think most places, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have the apprentice paid to be there in the beginning. And that's not because what they're doing is not valuable, but there's a lot of apprentices that come to a place and after 6 months or a year then realize, oh, this was not for me. And then that year was kind of wasted for both people. If the company knows that, like, okay, we're gonna put in some money in this person or spend our time with this person, and they know that they're gonna be with them for 5 years, it wouldn't be so much of an investment. But it's been our experience that people come and go at quite a rapid rate, whether it's because they don't like living in the UK, or they don't love living in Northamptonshire, or it doesn't pay as well as they thought, or it's harder than they thought it would be. People tend to fall off, and usually they've been there a little bit too long or not long enough. So it's a big frustration, I think, for a lot of firms, is that it's so hard to find people that really want to do it. Or have realistic expectations of what the business is. So that would be so I would say try to get as much information as you can, both about, you know, what you want to do, what the company you're interested in working at want you to do, you know, and also, like, what are your expectations of your career as a shoemaker? Like, are you expecting to have a certain income? What's your goal income for your standard of living? Is shoemaking going to provide that for you? Because maybe in the first 5 years you can live off the passion of shoemaking, but everybody gets older, you might want to have a family, a house, you know, and some of these things are easier funded by other careers. And like I mentioned before, do you love shoes or do you love shoemaking? And one of the things that we look for is people that like doing it, and also like the everything around it. You know, there's people that want to make shoes, but they don't want to learn how to sharpen a knife. You know, and you know, if you go to a chef, or, you know, they would say the same thing. They're one and the same. So you need to like the tools, and you know, I never met a good shoemaker that doesn't love tools. So get your tools together first. You know, I tell a lot of people that come and they show they want to be shoemakers, but they don't own any tools. I tell them, get all the tools and then you come back and we look at it again before, because if you're not interested in the tools, you're not going to be interested in doing the job. So whether you work here or somebody else, you're still going to need the tools. So go and spend money on those first, because before you have that, you can't do anything. And also I think one thing that helps us to see is, do we keep bumping into this person? If we go to an event, is this person there? Are they go to everything in the shoe community? Whether it's just like you know, shoemakers pub night, you know, that we arrange in London, or at your event at the Super Trunk shows. You know, if a guy or girl, we just bump into them once, or just send an email like, hey, I want to be a shoemaker, teach me. And we say no, and we never hear from them again, never see them again. You know, they weren't probably that passionate about it. But if they keep popping up and being involved year after year, you know, you start realize, you know, maybe this person is really into this for the long run, and you might want to give them an opportunity, because there's an opportunity for us to get some help from a person that gives the right type of help. So that's what we kind of look for.
Yeah. If you know how much hard work you've been through to become the successful bespoke shoemaker you are today, would you have done it again?
You know, it's probably maybe being a bit naive. If somebody would have kind of given me a clearer view of what shoemaking life would look like, I would still say, like, yeah, I'll do it. But I think if I got knocked over the head today and like all the things I learned kind of magically disappeared, and somebody told me like, oh, you're gonna have to start practicing from scratch, then I'll be like, really, like I really want to do this over again.
Thank you very much, Daniel Wegan,
thank you
for being part of the Shoegazing podcast.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Anytime.
Cheers.
That's it. Thank you for listening in on this episode. For much more on classic shoes, visit shoegazing.com. And to those of you who want to support shoegazing and the continued production of high-level content, I have now launched a Patreon page where you can contribute with anything from $3 a month. Any help is much appreciated. See shoegazing.com for more info on this. In the next episode, I will talk about setting up a new shoe brand with Tom Brown of Sons of Henry. So hear you again soon.